everyone. I am Janet Angel, and I am thrilled to be bringing you a new mini-series entitled Athlete Aftermath to kick off this Media Literacy Week. And we are going to be focusing on athletes in media. And with me today, I have one of my dear friends, Dr. James Spencer of Bearded Kettlebell. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited to bring you in because you are somebody who gets to see really a 360 view of athletics, not only with your own athletic experience, but now that you are on that medical and training side, really trying to keep people healthy and happy in their sport and really add longevity to how long they're able to perform. And then also just as we get older and we move into that second phase, how healthy we are.
Something unique that I get to see is athletes when they're probably in their most vulnerable state. Mm-hmm. Meaning when they first get injured, you see them, whether it's a career decision, maybe a career ending injury, and you get to build the trust with them. And that's really when I get to educate a lot of these guys, because if they are already performing well, they may not take into perspective what I'm saying or what I offer. But when they are injured, their back's up against the wall. It may be a free agency year. Mm-hmm. And they don't know if they're going to sign again or whatever it may be. So I find that's usually the time that I get to spend more one-on-one and really get to know them as a person and educate them on longevity, on career things that they can do outside of sports as well.
And that's such a valuable relationship for them to have with you, because as somebody who went through the athletic system, both collegiately and professionally, I know that there really wasn't a phase where I was prepared for what I now call the athlete aftermath. There is a really big emotional change. You go from being this person who is on the front page of the paper, who's on the Instagram, you're on the website, you're on the side of the bus, you're on a billboard, and you're somebody and you're really important. And you believe and feel that too. And I shared with you earlier, when I realized I was no longer Janet Angel, the volleyball player, was when I was walking through a Harris Teeter with my mother. And she's like, "This is my daughter, Jana. She used to play volleyball." And I just sat there going, what the hell does Jana do now? Because Jana didn't know. Jana had, stepped aside and made this decision to retire because I knew that I wanted the next phase. And it was to get into broadcasting and storytelling. But it was the first time that it really hit me that my jersey wasn't coming back on. How do you help those athletes work through it? Because I've been one of those athletes that I've blown out both ankles, blown out an ab, a shoulder, pretty much anything you could, I've managed to do. And some of those were at season signing time. And I had teams going, "We want to see how you recover." So you get to really play therapist in a lot of those ways. Truly.
And, honestly, I'm kind of honored in those situations because they take my perspective and they either run with it or don't. But the majority of the guys and girls do. And really, it's just opening up and having a conversation and letting them know sports, your athleticism isn't your identity. Mm-hmm. You being who you are is your identity. And sometimes that's guys need to figure out, girls need to figure out who they are, just as you did. Mm-hmm. And you knew that next phase was broadcasting.
Right.
For some of these athletes, they have no clue. And so that's really where I get to kind of step in and say, hey, I can only share my experience with myself and other athletes. And here's what I suggest. And for a lot of the guys, it's, hey, realize that there's also stuff off the court or off the field. And you can do that now while you're still performing. Mm-hmm. So that when you do finish your career or retire, you're already transitioning into what you would love to do.
Right.
And or influencing others in what you like to do.
Absolutely. And I think we can reflect on this past year. We've seen so many athletes, since this is Media Literacy Week, focusing on the athlete's response to press and to media. And with social media, obviously that's thrust in our face even more. Back in my day, I'm only 32, but when it was really just the technician and the website that was around, when I was having to go through that phase. But it's a constant onslaught, and you can be the absolute best, and there's still going to be people out there that can find you online that aren't going to be a fan of you. How have you seen athletes react, especially when they're injured? Because I feel like that's when the media really gets into a feeding frenzy. Are they done? Are they over? Is their girlfriend or husband going to leave them because they're injured now? And we've seen athletes take a step back, like Osaka, for example, and say, listen, I didn't sign up to be on the press junket. I signed up to be a tennis player. I signed up to be a volleyball player. I signed up to be a football player. How do you see them navigating that?
Yeah. One particular experience that kind of jumps out at me, it was one of the athletes I was working with was being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and they were going to do a photo shoot after our treatment. And the photographer came in and he said, "Hey, do you mind if I document this?" I said, "Well, I don't mind, but it's not about me. It's about him.
Right.
And if he's cool with it, I have no problem." So the athlete said, "Yeah, go for it." And I remember we were doing some dry needling and I hit this spot.
And can you just tell everybody what dry needling is, just in case because I want this to be for people who aren't just athletes. I want this to be for anybody really going through that kind of transition. But if you don't know what dry needling is, it is amazing. But boy, am I glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Think of it like acupuncture, a completely different modality, and the depth of penetration of the needle going into the muscle to reduce tension, reduce pain, whatever it may be, is a little different than acupuncture. And
savage is what it is.
It is, but it's very, very effective.
It is.
So as you can tell by the way she describes it, that's exactly what happened to this athlete. And I remember the photographer was right in front of him, and face to face, the athlete was laying face down. I hit the spot. He jumps up face to face with the photographer, and he looks at me. He's like, "You see what we do for you guys?" And I was like, "Wow, that's very interesting."
Yeah,
because people don't see the behind the scenes of hours of training, hours of commitment, hours of rehab, nutrition. They just think that, it's all, glory.
Right.
And living in a hotel, traveling from city to city, it's not as fun or glamorous as they think.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, it is very, very easy to look at people who are, especially athletes in like upper echelon, I think, pay scales. It is what it is. I joked earlier, I've made hundreds of dollars in the professional volleyball arena. Am I living the same as like a retired NFL Super Bowl champion? Absolutely not.
Not yet.
But not yet. This podcast takes off.
Exactly.
Subscribe below. So, but taking people who put in those same amount of hours. And something that I think is so important too is like, it's not just those people on the court. You're there the whole time. I mean, my pro athletic trainer would be there an hour before all of us were to get everything warmed up, to get everything prepped. And we were there at 5 and 4:30 in the morning. So imagine coming in at 3:30 in the morning to help a bunch of adult babies, because that's what you turn into when you're injured. I don't know what it is. We're very mentally tough until we're injured. And for some reason, that trainer is our safe space. And we're like, everything hurts. Everything hurts. I have a blister on everything. I don't know how I'm going to get through this training. And you guys provide such a safe space. I know my athletic trainers were always a real saving grace for me, but they also got to see just that entire view of what we went through. They saw people when we didn't win. They saw how angry people would get. They saw when we won, how we were, on top of the world until the next Friday or Saturday when we were going to hit the court again. And
it was cool too, being in that realm, because you're part of the team.
Mm-hmm. You are,
and whether somebody's injury or performance is based upon, what you're offering, it's to have that environment and really the team aspect. You guys grow together. And so it's cool to be able to offer, not only education, but opportunities, longevity.
Right.
And some guys take it and run with it. There was an athlete we were working with this past season who was rehabbing from Tommy John surgery.
Wow.
And it was great for some of the minor league guys to see him rehab, because he showed up before and stayed after. He'd do the ice baths and things that most people don't find sexy and or don't want to do.
Yeah.
They come in, do their work, and leave. Not this guy. And he will get more years out of his career because of that.
Right.
But also leading by example.
And something that I think is so fantastic about your program is that it's not just for people who have been injured. It's something that you can actually go ahead and start adding into your workout routines to really focus on those smaller articulations, because injuries are one of those things that you just never know what it could be. It could be you decided to do a celebratory backflip after you hit a touchdown and that's what took you out of a season, or it could be your own teammate coming under the net, blew out both my ankles that way. You just never know what it's going to be, but the stronger those smaller muscles are, the better they're able to support those larger muscle groups. And before I completely nerd out on that, it's just something that I want people to consider, especially if you are in your career, if you're building. And I think this goes for people who are in or out of athletics. Like if you're willing to come in, you're willing to do the work, you're willing to make that team move forward. Is everyone excited for game day? Absolutely. That's the only reason we go and puke our guts out every single week in training. That's what we do it for. But if you're willing to put in that extra work and that extra time, you will see that as a result of it.
And that's really why we created the humanitarian project of the Balance program. For athlete and non-athlete, when we age, statistically, we're more likely to die from a slip and fall injury than we are cancer after the age of 60.
Man, getting old really sucks.
Yeah. So but it also helps athletic performance. So we see a lack of balance increases your chance of Tommy John surgery. So from not only performance, but life longevity, anti-aging, that's really why we created the Balance program and project, because educating people not only to play, but to have fun and embrace their inner kid, everybody enjoys that.
Yeah, I mean, who's not going to have fun? I mean, your logo is a kettlebell with a beard on it. Is the bearded kettlebell fun? I mean, everything about, both of those brands that you've created are fun and are enjoyable. But so much of it is being able to really care for yourself so that you have a life after sports. I know that the doctor that evaluated my dad after he had his knees cut out from under him at training camp. And, obviously, my dad's in his 70s. So the surgeries were very different. It's something that probably could be done orthoscopically now, wouldn't be a big deal. But for then it was going to be a real slice and dice job. And thank goodness he had a doctor that said, Dave, if you want to walk around with your kids or you want to play golf when you're 50, he's like, you need to find something else to do. He's like, we'll repair you. He said, but to get you back on the court, you might get 2 or 3 years. He's like, but you probably won't be walking with your 50. So how do you guide people, like when you do have to deliver news or something like that? Because I know that as trainers, you're also getting bombarded by the media because they want the inside scoop. I mean, I can't count the number of times where people tried to sneak into the training room or tried to bribe our trainers to give them the lowdown on what was going on with us. So I can only imagine in these larger sports that you participate in.
So 2 examples. One is a good story from a mentor of mine when he was the head athletic trainer. He would have umpteen people call and say, well, I can fix that in 7 days. And he's like, after about 5 or 7 of those calls, the one guy who called said, hey, I can fix him in 7 days. He says, oh, okay, I'll agree to that. Now, if he's not back on the field in 7 days, you're going to pay his yearly salary.
Woo.
And the guy's like, whoa. Well, I can't guarantee that, right? And it's a good story, but it's also practical because that's the stress that a lot of staff and coaches and trainers are on, to not only timelines from the business standpoint, from the player standpoint, but also from the media standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so it also holds us accountable. Like, biology is biology. We can do as much as we can to expedite the healing process, but it's also going to take time. It's
also a human body. And that's what I think we have to remember is that athlete, it's not just a number. It's not just a contract. Like, that's a human healing. And I think you can look at that with anything, whether that's, emotionally and mentally healing or that's physically healing. They both take time. And if you don't allow for that time, then you're not going to get the proper result. Anytime you rush anything, you're not going to get that ideal result back. I heard something yesterday that I thought was so great. It was from a mentor at Cinespace, and she said, everyone wants to be a microwave society. And I said, what do you mean microwave society? She goes, everyone wants to be hot in 20 minutes. And it's so true. Everyone wants to be either famous, fixed. We want to be wealthy. We want to in 20 minutes. And that's just not how things are.
Nor is it, if you do get that way, mm-hmm. It's not a long-term strategy.
Right. Exactly.
And then the other story that I was thinking of is I had an 18-year-old high school soccer player. Her and her mom came in, and this was my first year in practice. And the best way is obviously honesty.
It is.
And if you have to be stern about it, or, hey, here's my opinion, not everybody's going to trust it or whatever it may be, but this is what I believe. And she was a candidate for an ankle replacement at 18.
Jeez.
Now, her sister played Division I soccer, and she wanted to follow in her footsteps. Mm-hmm. And so she had a scholarship to go to a Division III school. Now, that being said, it's Division III. And no knock on that, but why are you going there? Mm-hmm. Is the question that I had to ask her.
Sure.
And it was to follow in her sister's footsteps. Okay. If you can't afford it, or your parents can't afford it, yeah, go on the scholarship. I said, but I want you to think about when you're 40 or 50, can you run and play with your kids? Because I think that's going to bring you more long-term fulfillment than you getting a 4-year degree from, Skips University. Mm-hmm, right. And I said, I really do believe that you and your mom need to have a conversation about what is the long-term strategy here. And listen, if you want to go play soccer, by all means. Mm-hmm. It's just, you're not going to be able to compete at the level that you're wanting to. And not only that, you are going to need an ankle replacement
Right.
long term. And so having those, blunt conversations, they have to be had. And, you just have to come from a place of empathy.
When you're having these conversations, have you ever just had someone just vehemently disagree with you, blow you off? And like, how do you deal when somebody, I guarantee you not everybody's coming to that conversation like, you're right, Dr. Spencer, thank you so much for shining the light on me. No, like I know when I was injured, I don't want to hear it from anybody. When certain things happen to me, there's a time where it's really hard just to intake anything because your career is just in the balance.
You got to read the player, right? And their timing is everything for that. Of course, when it's acute and hot and you don't breach that conversation. But the reality is I'm either on your staff as a team member, or I am, you're here in my office asking for my opinion. You don't have to take it. But this is just based off of my years of experience, my knowledge, and my true honesty that I'm here to help you.
Right.
And not every physician is out there, but when somebody comes into my office, they can feel that.
Right.
And again, I'll do whatever I can. I'll take my shirt off my back for you, but here's my opinion. I'm going to stand by that.
Something that you touched on very briefly, but I think is a really relevant sidebar, is when people do have to have conversations with their parents. And I think this probably applies more to collegiate athletes than professional. But the role that parents play in so much of this is really crucial. I think we all want, if I was a parent, I'd want to be supportive, I'd want to be fantastic as a parent and what that child needed. But I think we also have to acknowledge that a big part of being an athlete is being ferociously independent. You are part of a team 90% of the time. Even if you're an individual athlete, you're still part of another team. But so much of being, I think, a really great athlete is being able to function on your own independently. And I would just take this moment for whatever parent is, maybe their kid is going through sports. You think their coach is a moron. You think every other kid on their team sucks. It's probably not the accurate picture. So I would, it's like small PSA for the parents. It's one of those things where be their support system, be there to be a sounding board. Don't immediately go run, get that coach fired. Don't immediately go run and say, Sally sucks. She shouldn't be playing. My daughter should. Be realistic with your child, because I think so much of athlete aftermath can actually happen in high school, in middle school, in college, where we've been prepped for this track. Maybe you were like me, you were the tallest kid in your class. Of course, she's going to be great at sports. I could have been terrible. Like, who knew? But we get pushed on this track, and, maybe we're in a smaller market or we're in a smaller division, and we do excel, and it's really great. But everyone has just pushed into us that we're the best, that we're the absolute best, that we're going to be an Olympian, that we're going to be a collegiate athlete. And you could easily get to a point where you are injured, or you don't get that letter, or you don't get that phone call. And that's a whole nother bracket of reality that a kid has to hit at a very young age. Have you ever had any experiences where you saw that news, or where you saw maybe a parent just get too involved and you tried to step in?
Yeah. And coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah. A high school athlete I was working with, he was burnt out, and they were spending a lot of time in the pool. And I said to mom, I think he just needs to go to the Keys and go fishing. That's what he loved to do. Let him be a kid. Mm-hmm. Let him have this reset, not only away from the team, but to mentally prepare himself for what he wants to achieve. And I think it was 2 weeks off, and then he came back and PR'd 3 of his swims. So it was awakening for the coach as well to realize how much he had been pushing this athlete in the pool. And, gas pedal down all the time is not the answer.
Right.
It's not more hours equal better results. And everybody's different too. Everybody's an individual.
Yeah.
And this poor kid he was tall, and he was growing like a weed out of control.
Yep.
So he was very
been there.
Yeah, exactly. Very Gumby like, right? And my job was to bring everything together and get him stronger, not only physically, but just get the whole body working together. Yeah. And over the course of his career, he was very, very successful. When he hit states his junior year, he actually was districts, regionals heading to states, tore his shoulder capsule.
Damn.
Right. And so that was unfortunate. Several weeks, months later during rehab, he went to scratch something on his back and the capsule popped again.
Telling you just never know what it's going to be.
And here's what's crazy. The following year, we rehabbed him, got much stronger, still doing very well in the pool, was going to commit to a school, tore the other side capsule. And so he's looking at me like, are these signs? Like, should I?
Right. Should I maybe look into something else? Like, what else do I have to tear? Because I mean, also all those hours and there's pain going into rehab. I mean,
3 surgeries in a year is a lot, especially for high school.
And you can't even drink a beer yet. And you've already had 3 surgeries. Like, come on.
And then, 3 weeks later, again, we're districts heading to states. He was fixing the battery on his car and the hood went to fall on him and he turned to stop and tore it again.
Get this kid like a helmet and some pads. I mean, so gracious.
2 shoulder surgeries on both shoulders, 4 shoulder surgeries in 1 year. And he looked at me, he's like, what do I do? I can't make that call.
Right.
Now, these are clearly signs that you either need to look into a different career path, right? And what is after this? You've trained your whole life for this point. Do you want to go to college and swim?
Right.
Or do you want to go to college and pursue the career that you'd like to pursue? Because those are 2 different aspects of, am I going to go to a D1 school and swim, or am I going to go to a D1 school and enjoy what I want to enjoy?
Right.
And not have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning.
Listen, going to college or university as an athlete is so very different. Was it fun and exciting and awesome in its own way? Absolutely. But
it's a job.
They own you.
Yeah.
I mean, in every sense of the word. And, when you're looking at that from a perspective, it's a really tough decision. Like you said, like your young lady who was talking about what division she wanted to go into and if she wanted to play. Those are really true decisions that you're faced with, and they're not easy, but it's something that you really have to take a step back, and it's hard because you're 17. Like, the hell was anybody doing at 17 years old making these kind of decisions? Correct. I really don't think it's fair. But you have to take that step back and say, like, what's really going to bring me joy? What's really going to make me happy? I'm so glad that I played volleyball because I was just a very habitual, obsessive people pleaser, and that's all I wanted to do. So I was lucky in the sense that even though I was wildly uncomfortable most of my athletic career, I was with coaches that pushed me. They weren't my friends most of the time, but I created this bond with other women that was amazing. So my ability to have and maintain female relationships has always been really outstanding because they were formed in those locker rooms. And it wasn't because we were like besties all the time. You were literally somebody that's constantly coming for your spot, but you've also got a room with that person later.
Correct.
It's a very interesting, I would say, environment there.
And, it's also being on the road.
Yeah.
Is taxing.
Yeah. I learned if you can braid hair, you will make friends in female sports. Fun facts. That was
just FYI.
That was my icebreaker was I could French braid, and that's how I made friends.
And that's, truly having meals with people and sharing experiences and jumping on planes and buses and playing in cool places. It really does create a family, and you see that as you stay friends with a lot of these people after sports is over.
And something I want people to remember is if let's say you do put your kid through every sports training, you go to all the summer camps, you do all the things, and maybe they don't go to whatever that next level is, it is completely fine.
Correct.
That was not a waste. When I hear people say that like, oh, I spent all this time in college and I played and I didn't go pro, that was a waste. I played all these sports in high school, I paid all this money for lessons, they didn't go to college, that was a waste. Incorrect. Just teaching a kid how to be accountable, I would say, especially these days, I sound so old when I say that, but having a young person that can be accountable, that can have intuitive thinking, that can think of others around them and how their actions affect them is priceless. And I guarantee you it's worth the price of every single lesson, of every single personal training session. So when you are looking at something, look at the value add that it's bringing to their life. Don't just look at that end result and the checkbox that you get to say, my kid did this and this and this. How about you be like, my kid's a kick-ass person and Correct. I'm so proud of them.
Correct. And that's really one of those things that you see people really grow personally and professionally and step up into that role, whether it's a minor league guy getting called up to the big leagues or whatever it may be. When they take that role on, they become more confident.
Yeah.
And when you have self-confidence, that's only going to carry over into every aspect of your life, right? And to see that with so many guys, whether it's a Dominican guy coming over here to the United States who doesn't know English, and then when you see them 3 years later and they're fluent, I mean, again, that's a priceless education right there.
Right.
So to see kids really grow and step up into that role is really neat.
And I think also seeing how their teammates are able to react to that person. Did they make the effort to learn words to communicate with him? Were they welcoming? You know, did they take him to Thanksgiving? All of those things are really special that I know I experienced when I played overseas. It was not just an education for me, for my French teammates, but they also were very willing and eager to learn from me, which was really special. And they were the whole reason that I got into broadcasting. I started with like an iPhone and my first tripod that I ever owned and no microphone. The audio was terrible. So embarrassing. But making videos for them and telling their stories so that people did know the woman that was behind that jersey. We called it La Femme derrière le maillot, the woman behind the jersey. Because I saw how people reacted to us. And I was like, they don't know that we do anything other than like live here. We know when you have the questions with the kids at the end of the game and they're like, where do you sleep? And I'm like, at home. You don't sleep in the gym? I'm like, oh boy.
No.
So, I mean, kind of that storytelling behind the scenes action, I think is really special. I'd love to tie this kind of, just back into any words of wisdom that you have either for athletes that are transitioning or experiencing this aftermath feeling. You know, what would you say to either them or their coaches or their parents? Who do you want to speak to and what advice do you have?
Yeah, to all of them. And it's be your authentic self. There's nobody that can be you. And when you become more self-confident in that, there's nobody that can mimic what you're doing, and leading by example is the key.
I think that's beautifully said. I wish I would have known you before I started in sports. That would have been great. No, because I mean, I know that I was always, you know, and still as an adult, I struggle with that. I want to compare myself to who I want to be as opposed to the person that I would like to emulate or be like. I'm like, well, I need to be that person. No, you need to be who you were yesterday. I had a coach that had a great saying. Her name was Rita Stubbs, and she said, you have to be 100% of who you are that day, because every day you're not going to be 100%. It's just 100% of who can you bring to that court? Who can you bring into the boardroom? Who can you bring into the classroom? Be 100% of that person. And if today that person's at 98, you know, and tomorrow they're at 150, great. Bring whoever that is, but bring the most of yourself and the most authentic self that you can.
I like that.
Well, thank you so much for kicking off Media Literacy Week with me. I am very excited to have this mini series of Athlete Aftermath. So if you have an athlete that wants to tell their story, we're here to share it.